Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Social Work Rants podcast. I'm your host, Bass Moreno. Hope everybody's doing well. Saludos a todos. We have a wonderful guest on. Before we go into our guest, please subscribe to the brand new YouTube channel. Just type in the Social Work Rants podcast on YouTube. Hit the subscribe button. You can also follow the podcast on Instagram at the Social Work Rants Podcast. That's all one word. You can also follow the podcast on Twitter at Social Work Rants. You can follow the Facebook page. Type in the Social Work Rants Podcast, and it should pop up. Hit the like button. So get it while it's hot. Wonderful things are happening with the podcast. Finishing 2021 strong, going into 2022. So our wonderful guest, Kenia Maldonado, LMSW. If you don't follow her on Instagram, you're missing out because her posts are amazing. They're spot on. Tell it like it is. And it's just real, it's honest. And, you know, we need that in the field. So, Kenia, take it away.
Hey, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where people are tuning in from. Good morning, maybe. Thank you for having me on the podcast. I'm excited. I love the work that you're doing, but thank you for that wonderful introduction. So my name is Kenia Maldonado, and I am a social worker who's been in the field for a little bit over 20 years now. My current role is I work for city government in the capacity of a senior consultant. So I do a lot of work around coordinated entry, which is a system that's trying to streamline how people enter and exit homelessness, and just kind of getting a big picture of how much housing is needed to house the most vulnerable people, right? And then on the side, my side business is Onboarding Solutions. On IG, I'm onboarding staff. And, you know, I just started this business sort of out of passion, but also frustration. I'm sure we'll go into that, Bass, so I don't want to take away from the interview, but thank you again for having me on today.
No, absolutely. We're definitely going to get into the business aspect of things because I've been doing a lot regarding my business, setting things up and moving stuff from personal to business, all this stuff that they don't teach you in social work school that they should. They want us go get your LC and do a private practice, but do you need an escort? Do you need do you need an LLC? Do you need a sole proprietorship? Like,
yes.
How does that work? And every state does things different. So
yeah.
It's just a lot, and learning a lot is a lot of info, and it's like on top of like we have to like if we have our LM or our LC to get the CEU hours, we gotta pay for that, and
yes.
continuing training and follow like the DSM and then the new stuff with the code of ethics and all the changes with that I still haven't gotten into the changes.
Me either.
I'm still on DSM 4. I just touched off DSM 5.
Exactly. Listen, I'm right there with you. I get it. It's true. Yep.
It's a lot. So where are you based out of?
So I'm in New York City. So my 9 to 5 is downtown Manhattan, but I cover all of New York City. In my full-time job, I'm looking at the whole New York City sort of homeless portfolio. So yeah, I'm a New York City girl, born and raised from Harlem. I'm also Afro-Latina. My parents are Dominican and Honduran, so I have a little bit of sazon in me.
Nothing wrong with that.
Yes.
That's great. So um, so what's that is going on in New York? There's a lot going on. Like I've been mentioning on the podcast that this year and next, even next year is big things one way or another are coming for New York. We got a big mayoral race. I guess by the time this episode airs, I think the general election might already happen. So
yeah.
is we got a big mayor race, and then next year, the governorship is up for grabs. Like who knows who's going to run by then?
Yeah.
So it's
listen. There's a lot going on. Because I work for city government, obviously there's a lot of pressure. And even in my department, because homelessness is a big thing in New York, and so this whole mayoral thing, under our current leadership, there was some work done, but people, you can't satisfy everyone, right? And so we already have a so-called new mayor that's coming in, and he's already asking, they're already asking, like our higher ups are asking us to do like a 2-page sort of write-up of what's happening in our department. There's always been a lot of pressure in our department, but it seems like people are kind of like, they don't know which way it's going to go. And so everyone is sort of preparing. And it's interesting that you bring this whole mayoral thing. I don't know if it's a mayor mandate or if a commissioner mandate, but coming back from this whole COVID pandemic, we were out for a year and a half. And, some people have reasonable accommodation. There's a lot of stuff going on. Obviously, I'm not going to go into too much detail because I know that's not what this is about. But we were all laughing in the office because we got a memo yesterday that, when we came back, we had a relaxed dress code. You can wear jeans, you can wear whatever you want. Well, they snatching that from us because as of November 1st, no more dress down. We got to dress back up, business as usual. So people are kind of like, oh man, the only reason I was able to roll out of bed and come in here was because I had a relaxed dress code. You mean I gotta dress up? I have to actually iron stuff now. So it's like the running joke in the office because they're like, is this because the new leadership is coming in? Like, what's happening? So the pressure is on.
I don't know. Like, I had to iron, like, obviously, for work before the pandemic happened. So I was ironing for myself. Both of my kids' uniforms. Now the pandemic happened, and we're working from home for the most part. Right. So recently, and even like the job I had prior, like kind of like iron and stuff, but now full on iron just for me, and it's like, oh man, it's like Sunday night ironing time.
Listen, I'm not with it. That's why I said today, I said I'm going to exercise my jean wearing rights until November 1st. Like now I'm purposely rebelling. I'm wearing jeans every day just because I know that when November 1st comes, I have to make some attempt to dress up and look nice for my coworkers because we're not client facing. I'm like, we're going to dress up for each other. Like, what am I dressing up for? So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but it's interesting.
I saw something that they're like giving an incentive to city employees to get the vaccine.
Well, I don't know, because even that came down. As of November 1st, they're asking people like, you can't even come in with a negative result. You have to have your first dose as of November 1st. So I don't know what type of pushback they're going to get for this. But I'm gonna, stay tuned to see what happens, because now they're like, no, you have to be vaccinated, your first dose at least by November 1st. So I don't even think it's an incentive anymore. It's a mandate. It's like, you got to do it. So yeah, it's gonna be an interesting couple of weeks coming up.
to say the least. Talking about housing, and that's one of my biggest gripes, with being a city kid myself and seeing all the changes that's been happening. It seems like back in the day, like in the 80s, empty plot of lands is now some sort of housing. These luxury apartments or like these affordable, quote unquote, affordable housing, because I feel like our government from the mayor down doesn't know the meaning of affordable housing.
Oh, Let me tell you, affordable housing before used to be, like, 40, 50,000 was like the income limit. Now, if you actually look at the housing income limits for affordable housing, you can make up to 6 figures, and it's still, you fall within that bracket of affordable housing because rent has gotten that expensive in New York. And just to kind of go off of what you were saying, like, yeah, I mean, I grew up in Harlem where we had all types of vacant lots, and even things like the baseball field, they've taken those out. My brother used to play Little League in Harlem, and we used to have a big baseball field on 122nd, I believe. It's gone. They're luxury condos now. So like any, space that we had available to maybe build on or capitalize and do other things, they've become housing. I mean, they're building buildings on top of buildings at this point, and whatever wedge they can find on the New York
whatever wedge, exactly.
They are building. They are building. And let me tell you, some of these people with that affordable housing stuff, they get a pretty nice tax credit. Of
course.
Yeah. So it is, a lot of politics, a lot of money involved. And one of the things that I feel like I get, as a social worker sitting at these tables, just personally, I wish at a younger age I knew more about like real estate and investing, because there's so much money and opportunity when it comes to real estate. I mean, everyone needs a place to live, right? And sometimes we take that for granted. And so sitting at these tables when I'm, listening to developers and I'm listening to just people in the room that are talking about supportive housing and affordable housing, I mean, I'm like, dang, I wish that we could keep some of this within our community, Black and Latinos, people of color, like if we had more money and like more investment power, because there is a lot of money on the table,
absolutely.
There's a lot of money on the table. And I'm like, how can I get a piece of that pie?
Right, of course, we're talking about, these brownstones in Harlem back in the 80s. I heard you could get it for like as something simple as like $1.
Yep.
And now they're like multi-million-dollar properties, and all these neighborhoods in Brooklyn, like in the middle of the hood, are going for almost $1 million. And it's like the drug lords live down the block. These houses are going for like $1 million. So it's
it's true. And it's like, but people are buying it up. They're eating it up. Some people are just like, they have the cash to pay for this stuff, because I can never afford any of these new things that are coming up, affordable or not. I think rent is up to like, for a 1-bedroom, depending on what type of income you make, you're paying like $2,200-$2,300. And that's like a box, that's some people's mortgage. But that's New York City. New York City is definitely, as much as I have a love-hate relationship with New York City is kind of still the place to be. People love it here. So it's always going to be like a money-making machine.
Absolutely. Let's see how New York City rebounds fully from the pandemic whenever it decides to end.
Right.
So,
yeah.
It was definitely a mass exodus. I'm living proof.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
So and to see it's starting to bounce back a little bit, and I've been seeing all these IG just crime after crime after crime like crazy, and it's just
the crime is out of control. I mean, like I said, I'm still in New York, but even riding the train out here, like I have to watch my back. It's like back in the days in the 80s, when that
80s, 90s, yes.
Right. When it was bad out here, I feel like sometimes it's going back to that. Like I grew up in that era where you really had to watch your back, and it just felt grimy on the train. It kind of feels like that a little bit. So that's not a good thing. It's not a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and continuing on the housing theme, I feel. I mean, I don't have any statistics. This is just my opinion or whatever from what I've seen. But I don't think, in terms of housing, definitely like the shelter system has been hit hard. And I know Mayor de Blasio has tried different things in terms of like renovating hotels or using hotel space, for shelters and stuff like that. But I don't think the city ever fully recovered. It was already bad. The shelter system was already bad shape before. But then when Hurricane Sandy hit, I think it just never fully recovered, and then it was never fully really addressed the way it needed to be addressed. What do you think about that?
So I agree with you. So recently with the COVID pandemic, the hotels were being used to like try to do some social distancing stuff. So they were moving people from the shelter into hotels as a temporary situation. And now they're sort of going back and saying like, COVID is not over, but, we're moving people back into the shelters. And one of the things that I want to address, which is not necessarily the question you're asking, I feel that sometimes when we speak about shelter and homeless, people have this misconception that it's like, the people living on the street and, oh, that bum, as we used to call them back in the days, the bum. And really homelessness, when you talk about even supportive housing and affordable housing, I mean, they're working class people like you and I that are living in shelter because rent has gotten so out of control that even people working a 9 to 5 have sort of resorted to like, I can't afford this anymore. And so shelter is my only way to try to either, live free for a little bit so I can stack, which you're really not, and, shelter is, I mean, there's different types of shelters, right? Like I worked in the shelter system and I worked in a safe haven also, which is geared towards chronically street homeless individuals, which is like a different, it's the same model, but not really because they have more flexibility with people that live on the street because they understand that they're not so willing to come inside. So they're a little more, flexible as more housing first and harm reduction. But the shelter system is very saturated. I mean, I think that's the point that we're trying to drive here. It is definitely that, like there's not enough beds. Housing, there's a housing crisis right now. And people, the more expensive the city gets, the more expensive things are getting, people are sort of kind of going into shelter. There's not enough manpower. There's not enough housing. The city has been trying to figure it out. I know you brought back Sandy. And I wasn't really well versed of what was happening there. Actually, during Sandy, I was working more foster care, which is a whole different.
That's another beast. That's a
whole different beast. But yeah, with the shelter system, I've seen more around, the crisis with this particular pandemic and how it's affecting, just people, everyday people trying to survive out here, trying to make ends meet. I'm looking at how COVID has affected manpower because people don't want to do, there's workers that are kind of feeling like, I don't want to work in a shelter. Like if I don't have to do this and I've learned that I can do my job remotely or that there are other opportunities I can do remotely, why should I be inside the shelter doing this work? And so I've been seeing, because I do work directly with a lot of shelters and like everyone is screaming, there's a shortage with manpower. There are people that don't want to get vaccinated. So, it's like a whole HR nightmare. But in terms of the people that we're working with, I feel like there's more people that's coming into shelter because, and especially now that the colder months are coming. During the summer months, I think people kind of do like family reunification and they may go, bed surfing or couch surfing with families and friends, right? And so sometimes people overstay their welcome and a family member may be like, no, it's time for you to go. And so, yeah, and so people are now, it's getting cold. Some people are not with the I'm sleeping on the street. If you have kids, your only other resort may be I need to go and either rent a room or I may have to go into shelter. So I definitely see, I don't have like specific stats, but I can tell you that the numbers, they're going to balloon. And this is just because I've worked in shelter and I know this, the summer months, they go down, the winter months is cold, people come in. So the numbers are gonna go up. COVID has affected that. People are not working, people were getting unemployment, those benefits have cut off. Living wages are low, like people can't afford to live in New York City, honestly. But the city has come up with programs where they'll pay, landlords, so they'll help someone move from the shelter into some type of housing if they identify, they're willing to pay family to take people in. They have different vouchers that they try to shop around. So they do have options, but even with those options, those vouchers, landlords have been burnt before with some of these vouchers. So they're not so willing to, be so, like I'm accepting a voucher. And right now, because there's this whole emergency housing voucher thing going on, the federal government has released, the Section 8 list was closed for a long time. It's reopened now. And so everyone is scrambling to try to see how they can qualify for the Section 8 voucher. And I can just tell you that there's a lot behind the scenes that happens even with that. It sounds like a good opportunity, but sometimes to get to these resources, some people are just like, it's not worth navigating all these different systems just to get the voucher. So yeah, I mean, it's a difficult system, and that's really what my department is trying to focus on. How do we streamline this? How do we cut down so people don't get so, annoyed and disappointed and feel demoralized with the process? But there's a lot of moving parts, and there's a lot of just people involved. So it's not easy. And there's egos at the table all the time.
Oh yeah, of course. Of course, there's always egos and bullshit. And when it comes to money, people are crazy when it comes to money. Yeah. And there's always even like the rumors of our New York City's lovely mayor and the wife's stealing money. So that could have been used for the housing, but allegedly, like I'm putting this like allegedly.
I can't confirm or deny. I don't know the level. You can't
confirm or deny that, but that's been the rumor for the last few years.
But I will say, and not to credit anybody, I just feel like sitting at the table, like sometimes, as social workers stand on the outside is, oh, but if I was running that, I would run it differently. I would do this, I would do that. And then you come inside of the systems and you sit there, you're like overwhelmed with the amount of things that happen. And it's like, okay, well, where do you even start, right? Because as social workers, we come in with like this very tunnel vision. Okay, it's about the client. And I always keep the client at the front. But you deal with other people every day that are not social workers, and their focus is not the client. Their focus may be just the housing piece of it, the law, the politics. And so as social workers, it can be overwhelming. I love my seat at the table, but it's also sometimes like, gosh, like, I don't know, maybe it should just be social workers running the city. I'm just saying.
one day, but even people like, okay, you're the social worker, you figure it out, you got the tools, but like, just because I may have like experience in the field or got letters after my name, like I may not have done whatever like you were asking me to do in the first place. So like you kind of like stuck or like try to figure something out and you're like already overwhelmed with everything else going on.
Right. Yeah. It is like a no-win situation, but I do feel like as a social worker, I always let it be known that I'm the social worker. I'm always going to be keeping the best interest of the client. I don't care what systems are built, like the client, like I really say, do we reality test this? It sounds good in theory. The system sounds wonderful. However, do you understand if you add 50 more steps, then you're just kind of going further away from the client and their end goal. So we have to be mindful of that. So anytime like I'm in a room, they know I'm going to challenge stuff. It's like, okay, that sounds nice in theory. However, from a client's perspective, so yeah.
And you have to be, regarding housing, and you're right, there's not enough housing, even supported housing programs. I recently interviewed somebody who does the supported housing work, or at least the case management piece, and doing HRA to the 2020Es like online, and it's like he told me the whole system, like I used to do that and like things have not changed, and that was like a 10-year difference. And it's like, oh man, it's like and there's not enough for housing there's not enough housing, period. There's not enough housing for anybody, and we have all these vulnerable populations that we see every day, that we studied in social work school, and we see it, and it's just not enough. We got seniors, we got families, we got people with mental illness, we got HIV, we got domestic violence shelters, we got a common dual diagnosis with the HIV and substance abuse together, the HASA clients, and and all this stuff. So speaking of HASA, like what's going on with for HASA is housing for people diagnosed with HIV and AIDS. So what's going on with that program in the city? Because I haven't heard much at all regarding that program.
So they're still functioning. business as usual. I know that I don't work, well, my work with HASA is primarily around supportive housing. So I used to have a relationship with the person over at HASA, but I think that, they kind of restructured a couple of things over there. And so really what I get to see on that end is when they're referring people to housing. And then when people get accepted too. Now there are housing that are specific for people that are HIV AIDS. Like there's a lot of funding in that. I'm not well versed in it, so I'm not an expert, but I do know that they have, because I get to see in the system when it comes to housing opportunity that there are, specific housing set aside. So they have specific units that are set aside for people that fall under this specific category. So that's the best that I can tell you. In terms of like their leadership, I know that I would not be able to speak to all of that because I'm not well versed.
Gotcha. I was just was wondering because I really haven't heard anything, and it kind of seems like that specific population has always been like left behind and not talked about, and we still got the stigma of HIV as it is, so that plays a huge part.
Right.
Part of that. So
they definitely have housing opportunities. I mean, HASA, from what I see on my end, and from when I used to sit in the meetings with the people that were in charge of like housing, is that they'll pay for a lot of things for people that are HIV and AIDS, and they have services. They have specific services that are geared to this population. They're housing that's specific to this population. They pay for storage. So they do have the resources. I don't always know if the people know this, but they have different centers throughout the city where, clients can go and get services. And they have application. They have the 2010E application that they can fill out. And then it'll come up specific that they are like POP H, which is like the HIV AIDS category. And they also have like a NISHA application, which is a separate application for, I guess, different type of housing. So there are resources, but like I said, it's been a minute since they sat at the table with me. So as of lately, I don't know what's happening.
and this is specific for New York City.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, I work with that population with the HASA, and some of these apartments, like they is immaculate. It's like studio 1 bedrooms, and yes, pay for storage.
Yes.
Give them cleaning supplies. Give them like pots and pans, like brand new pots and pans.
Yes.
All they got to do is pay like 30% of their rent. So they. Sometimes they got it good, and some of them know how to play the system to get what they need.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yes. You always find people that know how to, and you know what? I can't even be mad. I'm like, go ahead.
No, you can't.
Because it's there. It's there for the taking. Go ahead. Do what you got to do.
Exactly. So I wanted to get into your business. What exactly is it? Now how like you finding like formalized it, what motivated you to do it?
Sure, no problem. So Onboarding Solutions was sort of an idea that I played around with for a while. So like I said, I graduated grad school over 20 years ago. Yes, I know I look 12, but over 20 years ago. And so I kind of navigated social work on my own. I didn't really have a social work mentor. I felt like I always found myself in spaces where I didn't have a social work supervisor. Maybe I was like one of 2 social workers in the space. Sometimes I was the only social worker in the space. When I worked in the court system, I pretty much was the only social worker there. And so I felt like I was navigating these waters by myself. So I always said like, all right, I want to build something where I pass on whatever I learned to other social workers. So I slept on it for a little bit. I said, all right, well, not yet. So then I got into a position where I was a program director of, like I mentioned, a shelter program. And, I didn't see a lot of people that looked like me in leadership. And so then I'm like, all right, well, like I'm onto something here, because how come how come I get into all these spaces where either I'm the only social worker or maybe I'm one of many, but people don't look like me in leadership. And my specific concentration in graduate school was social work administration. So I've always had a vision that I wanted to move into leadership. And I'm not one to back down, right? Like I'm just going to fight to the end. I'm going to figure it out. I want to be in the room with the people that are making the decisions, and I'm going to get there.
Right.
Anyway, so I was very happy. I got this position and I'm like, all right, I'm doing my thing. I'm like, helping build a program that was falling apart. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm qualified to be, for the next level. I did what I needed to do here. I've proven myself. And so, yeah, game on. I know I could get this position. I saved a lot of money. I mean, like I did everything. I applied for this, executive leadership position only to be told that I wasn't ready yet. I wasn't given a reason why I wasn't ready. It was just like, you're not ready. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, I did everything I needed to do. So I really got frustrated and I said, you know what? Enough is enough. Like, this is not fair. I feel like social workers need to be at the table. We work on the front line. And I feel like people that look like me only get to a certain point before you're no good, that you're not good enough anymore.
Right.
And so I sat on this idea and I kept playing around and saying, well, you know what? I should put them on blast. And then I'm like, well, no, that's your social work career. Like, you got to be more creative about this. Long story short, I started to play and like write notes on board and like, I'm going to develop this idea. What's the best way for me to put it out there? And initially it started out as an idea that I wanted to do sort of like some type of coaching and bring all the social work agencies to the table and do some type of like revamping how they recruit people into leadership. I'm like, you have the talent within your organization. How come you guys are always recruiting on the outside?
Right.
But then because I'm in a city government position and I kind of sit with the very people that will probably be my customers, I'm like, well, I can't really do that like that. But it's great to know who's, leading the ship at every organization. So I said, well, the next best thing is to tackle the second goal that I had, which was how do I impact change with social workers? Like, how can I sort of do this mentoring thing and put social workers onto game in terms of like, these are the skills you need to move up. And so I said, you know what, let me combine these two, but let me start out with the sort of client facing one, which was the easier one. Let me start out with the social workers and sort of put this thing out there where I can help you with your resume so you can get the right words to grab the attention of recruiters. I can help you with cover letters. I can help you with mock interviews so that you can know what to say so that we can start getting through these doors and breaking these glass ceilings to get into leadership roles, because I feel like as social workers, not just people of color, but just social workers, we need to be at the table making these decisions. So I finally sort of went on and I started my website. I did everything from scratch. I do everything. I'm like, I'm the content creator. I run the website. I do everything. And I still was, that imposter syndrome. I'm like, well, I don't know if I'm good enough. Like, I don't know if people are really going to buy into this idea. It sounds good, but I don't know.
Right.
Got on IG, started playing around a little bit by little bit, started posting certain things, but I still wasn't showing up as my authentic self because I'm like, well, if I come on here and I just kind of don't show my face, then they'll think that it's a white person behind this. And like, then it's cool, right? It's cool. And then, then my friends started kind of saying, but like, this is your business and they need to see that you're a woman of color behind this idea, like own your stuff. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm still a little nervous about it. Anyway, I finally said I was going to come out of this like uncomfortable zone and I'm just going to start to be real with myself without necessarily throwing agencies under the bus. But I feel like people probably can relate to some of the stuff that I have.
Yeah.
So I just started posting. Like some days I would post and I'm just like, all right, I'm scratching. I probably am going a little bit too far. And people just started coming to the page and they started liking it. And then, I put the resume thing out there and then like I actually started getting customers and I'm like, wow, like, wait, I can really do this. And now I'm here, 4,000 followers strong and still going. And I'm just, I'm shocked, but I'm not shocked because I know that we need it. And I feel like sometimes as social workers, we're always in these little silos. We feel like this, but we don't talk about it enough. We don't talk about that there's money in social work. Some of us take these opportunities and we don't negotiate at the table. We just take things like, all right, well, 35,000, cool. And there are things that I learned along the way that I'm like, now I look at things differently because I've been in leadership. I look at the budgets. And so I'm like, I need to put my social workers onto game. Like there's money at the table. Let's go get it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
How long did you start the business? Like how long?
So I would say 2 years ago was when I finally started to kind of play around with it, but I've been almost 1 year strong with the content creation and like, getting people to the page and having customers and people sort of believing in the product. I would say I'm close to a year with that now. And it's been a journey. It's been a journey that I'm grateful for because like I didn't think that I knew it was something good, but like I said, that imposter syndrome always shows up like, I don't know.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Even like starting the YouTube is like, how do I put this freaking video? And it's so simple. It's just like just put it on, like record on Zoom and like pay for it and just put it up and that's so the content creation. Actually, somebody put me on game about another video source.
Oh yeah.
To cut these videos and just like start learning how to put clips up and get this brand pumping even more. So it's just I'm trying. That's like learning as you go, and like even today, like I finally converted my auto loan from like my personal name to my business name. So right off.
Yes. But these are the things that they don't teach us in social work school, right? It's always like, all right, we're going to graduate, you're going to go into the field, it's private practice, or you're going to work for a nonprofit, right? And so you and I are sort of stepping out of our comfort zone to do something different. And I mean, we've been in the field for a little bit, so we've seen a little bit. And I think that things are changing now. I don't know. I just feel like it's a different, when I speak to new social workers, I'm like, oh, they doing that? Like, I don't know. We didn't do that in social work school or
they still doing that?
that too. Or even sometimes when I come across some resumes and I'm like, you went to the career center? Like they actually let you walk out with this? Like, this ain't, like this is not going to get you through the door. As a hiring manager, I wouldn't even call you back. So I mean, like I said, it was something that was like I was passionate about, but also frustrated. And being in the field for a while, like you see things, and just being a hiring manager, like I said, I used to get resumes and I'm just kind of like, wow, like we don't speak to our skills enough. I feel like social workers are so diverse and we wear so many different hats and we don't speak to those skill sets. And so I want to change the narrative around that. I want to be able to kind of say like, no, we're not the least paid people in the room. Like we actually can make money. Our skills are transferable. They're not just limited to social work. I mean, depending on how you word your resume, you can probably get a corporate position. So, I mean, we got to speak to our skill sets. We still spend all this money to get this education and then we come out and we're complaining, oh, I'm only making 40, 50. No. We're not doing that.
or less than that. These nonprofits, the pay is terrible. It's like, I was doing the job search and like for a while, like late last year and it's like, it's crazy. It's insane, but and then I've seen more and more people post about the transferring of skills to, like corporate America, stuff that we do in social work that you said like transfer over. And it's like, whoa, like that. I don't think that is even really talked about in social work too either. So it's like, so you do stuff, but then you realize that it could be done in something else, but they like kind of like, I want to say brainwash, but it's like it's like this in social work, but that's it. So
no, absolutely.
Client-centered and
Absolutely. I mean, even something as, people say, oh, I'm a case manager and I'm documented. I'm like, do you understand that case management is or sort of project management as well? Now, imagine putting project management instead of case management. The feedback is different, but a case is sort of a project because you have to delegate, you have to multitask, you got to come up with deadlines, you have to, come up with a goal. That's all project management. But as social workers, we're not taught that. It's just case management. It's like, all right, that's nice, but this is really a project. They don't tell you that. They don't tell you that. So yeah, we definitely have to speak up our skills. And I enjoy receiving resumes. I enjoy speaking with, because the resume service is not just for entry level social workers. I've gotten, experienced social workers that come and just, they've been out of the game of a job search for a while, and they, haven't updated their resume in a while. And it's like, all right, let's work on that. The mock interviewing I love, because as, someone that did hiring for an organization, I like to ask those hard questions and really challenge people to come out of their comfort zone and how they answer the questions. Because, we do the day to day, and we don't think about how much we do handling one case. And so I challenge people when I'm interviewing. I'm just kind of like, all right, tell me about a difficult client. I don't want to just hear, oh, they did this. Tell me who was involved, what interdisciplinary team, like all of that. Tell me your story, and that will make you more marketable than someone coming in and just saying, well, I did this and I just followed up and then I closed the case. No, let's talk walk me through everything. So I challenge my social workers to really, look at your resume and think about, is it really telling your story? Because a lot of times we miss the mark. We're not telling our story, and we're not speaking to the skill sets that we have. So yeah, that's really what onboarding is about. It's about changing the narrative, letting people know there's money in social work. That sometimes you have to make your own path. It's not going to be private practice. It's not going to be, working for a nonprofit. It can be what you and I are doing, podcasting, starting your own business. And that's okay. That doesn't mean that you're watering down your social work skills. That means you're incorporating it into other things that you like.
So, right, absolutely. You find something, doing something you actually like what a concept. We're at jobs all the, even now, working in the school, and it's like, school is I know it's going to be crazy because of the pandemic and kids, being remote, but man, I'm already burnt out already. I'm like, when is Thanksgiving break? I'm like,
oh my goodness. But the kids had it hard too. They were home
of course.
For a year.
Yeah.
In New York, they were home for a year, and it's just adjusting to just being back in school. But yeah, I can imagine. I can imagine what you're going through. That's a lot. That's a lot. But I commend you, because I know.
Yeah, and it's kind of similar with this everything going on. This pandemic is we're really going to see in these next year and change going into. We probably really won't see a huge difference to probably this time 2022. Just really the full impact, and just people really taking a breath and a deep sigh is well, what just happened? And
I know.
Moving forward, and you see mad job postings, and but people, like you said earlier, if I could work remote or figure something out, own or starting a business, and I'm making making the same amount or close to what I was making before working a 9 to 5. I'm not going back. And so it's only time will tell.
Yes, this pandemic changed the game for a lot of people. Just it's different. And I feel like even social work is going to look different, because in New York, when this whole pandemic with the kids going back to school, there was a mass hiring for social workers. And, when have we been on the map like this? So I think this is a chance for us as social workers to capitalize off of this as well. Because for the people that don't want to work, for those people eager to have an opportunity, I feel like this is the time, because companies are actually paying money because they're so desperate. So this is the time. But yeah, it's different.
Yeah, I've noticed definitely with a lot of jobs for social work, especially here in Delaware, they were definitely looking for elementary school social workers, and with state benefits, or even the state contracting out to other agencies for looking for social workers. So it definitely it's still a need, because people are still looking.
Right. Yeah.
So but I feel like it's still you got to either have your LM or LC to really get these opportunities. So okay, for our graduates that just got their that are not licensed yet, and they're kind of like, stuck in a way. And it's
Right. Right.
that part of the of what in social work, I'm not really feeling that, and even more companies are looking at LCs compared to LMs, and it's like, you gotta, we either like gotta like take the take the test for the LC, even though we don't want to do clinical work, but just to have like the extra letters to get the extra money, or you gotta create something on your own. So it's an interesting. There's a lot of opportunities, but it's like you're still kind of stuck in a way.
Yeah, I mean that LC, I personally, I didn't even want to get my LM because I was just like, I'm going into administration, like I don't need to take it. And I graduated in a time where you were able to take your LMSW exam before you graduated. And then they stopped that. They stopped because people were taking it like 3, I think up to 6 months before you graduated, you could take it. And then some people were grandfathered in when it was like the CSW that became LMSW. I waited 7 years after grad school to take my LMSW exam. And then the LC, I've worked in clinical settings, but I never really like pushed too much to get the hours. So I'm just kind of like, I'm old. I don't think I'm gonna get the LC at this point. Like you ain't gonna get no hours and studying from me at this point. Like, no. But yeah, I do see that a lot of people want the license. Now, I know that some positions do like the probationary, that they'll hire you contingent on you passing the exam.
Right.
So they have that, and then they have people, organizations that are willing to let you get the hours on the job as long as someone can supervise you, so you can, sign off. They can sign off on those hours. But I feel like we can get creative with stuff like that, right? Because we're the social workers, and half of the time, people that are posting these positions are not social workers. They just put like, okay, what's the requirement? Okay, LC, then that's who we need to hire. And so if we can talk more up our LMSW skills, I know it's not clinical, but maybe we can buy into some of these organizations, like more organizations that be willing to support us, pay for us to get the hours, hire appropriate supervision, because even that seems a little funny sometimes in some organizations. So I think that if they want it, they need to support us in that. A lot of organizations want a lot of things, but they're not willing to pay. But I also feel like as social workers, we don't speak up either, right? Because like in my interview, or when I interview people, I tell them, ask them if they're willing to pay for your LMSW or reimburse you for it, right? Or your LC exam. Are they willing to, offer you clinical hours? Are they willing to pay for that? Like, we have to advocate for ourselves as well. And I think that, social workers, we're big advocates for our clients, but we don't do a good job in advocating for ourselves.
Absolutely. I still struggle with that.
Yeah. So I feel like that's an area where, in order for our field to be respected more, we need to open our mouth and talk about what we need, right? We need self-care, we need certain breaks, we need advancement opportunities, we need them to pay for CEU hours. There's a whole list that we can walk in there with. And so when people come to me and like, oh, my job is not doing this, I'm like, okay, but are you asking? Like, what did you ask for at the table? Because some of these things should be negotiable. And even if they say no, at least you asked, and kind of like, am I going to take this opportunity or am I not, based off of the answer that they gave me to this? But if we don't ask at all, then we're doing a disservice to ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I really feel like as social workers, we need to do a better job at advocating for ourselves and asking for what we need up front. Because if they're not going to pay it to you in dollars, they can pay it to you by reimbursing you for some of these credentials that we need to do this job and to keep our license. Yeah. So I think that's one of my takeaway messages, is that when we're interviewing, when we're, trying to negotiate certain things, and even in the job, asking your supervisor, like, how are they willing to support you with some of these things? You have to ask. A closed mouth doesn't get fed.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've learned in my almost 20 years in social work, just because somebody got an LM or LC, they know how to supervise you or know what the hell they doing. So
no.
So just for all the newbies or everybody who's still in school, like, just be mindful of that. So.
Yes, I did a post around like you can have a 4.0, but you can still be a bad manager. Book smarts and actually working out in the real world are two different concepts. You could have aced everything in grad school. You could have an LMSC, all of that good stuff, but you could still suck as a supervisor. Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree with you. And that's a training within itself. I didn't go through any leadership boot camp. I wish I did. Because sometimes it's sad to say, employees have more issues than our clients sometimes. We're humans too. We're humans too, and we come in with baggage. And sometimes it's harder to manage our staff than our clients because staff become HR nightmares sometimes. And so that's something that I learned quickly when I had my leadership role and just managing people. People have personality. It's not somebody you can just shift and say, all right, I'm gonna move you over here. Another thing that I feel like social workers struggle with in leadership is holding people accountable. We don't hold people accountable as supervisors, I can say. Sometimes you don't want to have that confrontation. And so you let staff get away with things over and over, and you create a headache for yourself. And then you're like, oh, how did we get here? Well, you got there because you never held the person accountable. You didn't start a written warning. You didn't put some type of corrective action plan together. And so, for anyone that's looking to move into leadership, it's lonely at the top. Everybody's not going to be a friend. You have to manage up to the CEO and everybody, but you have to manage down to your team. You got to keep a fine line between being too friendly and also being able to enforce the rules. And you got to be no nonsense sometimes. Everybody's not going to like the decisions you make, but at the end of the day, you're responsible for running a program or organization, an agency, and your name is behind that. So you got to really think about how are you going to run your ship, because that can make you or break you. But
absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So everybody can't be a manager. It ain't for everybody. It ain't. It really isn't.
I did my toe in that, and it's like I didn't get much support, but it wasn't for me.
Yeah.
You mentioned a buzzword, self-care has been thrown around a lot. But what do you do to practice self-care?
So now I've learned just shut everything off, right? Before I used to be on call and I always felt like I was walking on eggshells, and so I couldn't really self-care. And so now, I just make sure I take time for me and try to engage in non-social worky things, right? Because self-care is not, I'm not, at work, but I'm still talking about work with my peers. No, I try not to even hang with social workers when I'm completely off, because I don't want to hear anything. I don't want to hear about a crisis. So I really try to, reconnect with myself. So I know some people are like spa day. For me, sometimes it's just going jogging and getting in touch with nature and just kind of recharging. It may be just, watching a movie that, I have a whole playlist of things I need to, kind of watch. So it may just be doing that. I like to listen to music. So sometimes it's just listening to music and getting in my zone. Family time, hanging with my mom, sisters, just things that have disconnect completely from being a social worker. I don't want anybody to even ask me for advice on the weekend. I don't want to hear
exactly.
No, just leave me alone. But I think it's really important because I feel like sometimes we don't know how to disconnect. We just kind of just keep going and going and going. And I had done a funny post that says, even when I'm not social working, I'm social working. And it's a real thing. It's a real thing because you find yourself in situations where now all of a sudden you started a conversation and now wow, I'm analyzing and diagnosing this but me time is very important for me. I don't need to have a full spa day. Sometimes just taking a bath is good for me. Vacations are wonderful. I love to go on vacations and just disconnect from the world. But I think that people self-care in different ways, and it's whatever works for you. But my biggest advice is just nothing social worky, nothing work related. Some people are like, oh, I volunteer. That's not self-care for me because it's still social work related.
Right.
That maybe around the holidays. But when I'm saying self-care, I mean turn it all off. Nothing that's related to social work.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So how was 2020 for you as a person? I mean, just overall 2020 for you?
Well, 2020 was definitely some trying times. I lost my dad in 2020. So that was sort of like the beginning of like, oh my gosh, because my parents were married over 40 years. So like dad was like dad. And so to lose him sort of like in the middle of like this global pandemic and just trying to cope with that, to add this extra layer of sort of confusion, it took a toll on myself and my family. But I will say that, just thinking about what he would have wanted for, me in terms of like, he always say, live your life, do what's best for you. Like, don't live with regrets. I think that, losing him kind of was the push to sort of go out on the edge and do this whole onboarding thing full-fledged. And so I think that 2020 was a balancing act. I was grateful to still be employed, to spend time with my family, but I also think that it helped me in sort of, I don't know, owning who I am as a person. Because I feel like I've been walking to that, but I think that 2020 really sort of closed the deal for me and saying like, it's now or never. Because one of the things I feel like I learned in 2020 is that life is short. For a good while, all I saw was RIP, RIP all over Facebook. Anytime I logged in, it got to the point where I didn't even want to log in anymore. And so I said, if I don't learn anything else from 2020, is that either you do it now or you're never going to do it. And so I went harder with onboarding, and I don't know, it's just been like uphill since then. Like I've been able to connect with more social workers. I've been able to live in my purpose. I've been able to just boost my confidence in a way where I'm like, you have certain things all along, but then it's like, I don't know, one day you wake up and it's like, oh snap, like it just all comes together. So that's 2020 for me in a nutshell.
That is so freaky, because I like really like that kind of describes me in a way too. No, my condolences. No, for your loss of your dad. So I had my loss too.
Right. Yeah.
With my mom, and then just I started the podcast, right. And like I moved to a whole other state during the pandemic.
Right. Yeah, that's big. That's huge. That's huge.
Opened my LLC, so I got a house, bought a car. I did bad shit.
Yeah, now or never.
Exactly, now or never. But I call this COVID era the era of shooting a shot. Just like reaching out different people. Yes, I connected with so many different people.
Yes.
Virtually, and people started doing like virtual Zoom parties, like social work.
Yes.
things and participating and meeting different people and figuring things out and just reaching out like LinkedIn and like DMs on IG, like, hey, come on the podcast. Hey, I'm doing this podcast.
Yeah.
To a point, like I came up with like a mini script. Like started sending back people stuff. So like,
yeah, that's dope though. That's dope.
So like I totally feel what definitely resonates with me, what you just said in terms of living your purpose. And the worst that can happen is like no, and you try and you're gonna make mistakes. The best way to make mistakes is just learn, and
yes, absolutely.
Hopefully it won't cost you any money.
Right, yeah.
Or not a lot of money, because business is gonna be making mistakes and and like I could have been doing this. Like, my whole drama with the car, like I should have. Like if it took like another 2 months, if I would have learned like 2 months ago, I would have like not even like gone through like half the drama I did with the cars. Like here's like already in the business name, Josh. Like from the beginning.
You live and you learn, though,
Exactly, so, that's you have to.
Yeah.
Just continue, keep pushing, keep grinding, and I even make the post. Like just like keep grinding a lot. A lot of good, a lot of bad coming in a year's time, but just keep pushing, keep grinding, just keep going. That's all you can do. And a lot of us are still gonna be at home because we're working remotely, so there's just more opportunities to just reaching out to people and on Zoom or something else come out in 2022, we gonna be on that.
Yes. Look, it's nothing but time and opportunity right now. And I never really understood that until now. Like, I feel like as negative as it was with this whole pandemic, there's some good that came out of it for a lot of us, because if we didn't have this time to reset and recharge, we would have been just spinning our wheels saying, I have this idea, and the idea would not have ever been, given birth to, or whatever it is.
Right, of course.
Yeah, so I think that we needed this. I mean, some of us needed this in order to get out of our comfort zone.
Yeah, just how these ideas and just like the writing poetry is just literally popped in my head, and like, oh, this makes sense. Like just writing, just makes sense. So like, okay, keep going. And it's like middle of the night. I'm like, I gotta wake up right now. Yeah. Something. I'm like sleeping. It was something popped in my head. Like, hey, if I don't write it right down, it's like I'm gonna forget it. So
that's the way I am with my content. I'm like in the middle. Oh wait, that's a good one. Let me jot it down real quick. Like, but once you get in that flow, it comes naturally. It's like, okay, now, because some days I'm like, all right, I don't really have content. And then I'll see something, or like you said, I'll be in the middle of sleeping, and then I'll pop up and be like, that's it. I got it. I know what I'm going to write about. So I actually like being in that zone. Like, I feel like I didn't even know I could be this creative. So I'm excited.
Yeah, I didn't know either. I joke around. I said that was like the antibodies when I first got the antibodies in my system. Like I did the first antibody test back in April, and it was like, and I finally got like the first COVID test I took, like, and came back negative, but I had the antibodies. Like that, I think that was it. That was like started like the creative juices and just like learning and stock markets and all this stuff. And and just constantly learning, always on a Zoom, always on somebody's IG live, learning. Like even my fiance was like, "You still on this IG live? Give me some attention." Like it's like I'm on somebody else's IG live. They talking about stuff like I'm learning. Like I'm not like BSing. Like I'm trying to learn and help us grow and help the kids grow. So it's just
exactly. And that networking is so important, because it's like now, even in social work, I feel like it's not always what you know, it's who you know. And sometimes being in the room with the right person can change your whole situation. So yes.
No, absolutely. Just networking and just staying in touch with like past coworkers. If they leave and they become like directors or whatever, like even like a past supervisor or director, like helped me get a placement when I was in grad schools.
Wow.
And, like in the agency that she was in, because my grad school didn't help me with a placement. So
I've been hearing
so I had to do it on my own. But I had the network to talk to. I was like, hey, you know somebody or whatever. And so like people always talk about don't make friends with coworkers. You need that. Like
you need them. And those are the things that we need to sort of like change the whole, like undo some of that. Like there's a lot of unlearning that needs to be done about that, like that, and not being friends with coworkers, even the idea of like no self-disclosure with your client. I mean, I feel like they need to know you're a little human, so it's okay, just a little bit, but I feel like there's so many things in social work that we've been taught that we have to sort of unlearn. So yeah, I think that one definitely speaks about the coworkers. I mean, like you never know who might, surpass you and may have liked your work so much and want to add you to their team. So it's good to make those connections, because I mean, I'm circling back to some of the people that I started my career with, and we look out for each other. We keep stay in contact. We look out for each other. Hey, this is an opportunity coming. Sometimes there are things that I pass on, like, hey, somebody's doing a podcast. Maybe you want to be featured on it. I love this whole thing. I feel like IG, that platform, has really helped us connect, even if we're not coworkers. I just feel like the closer that we come together and close the circle, we become stronger. And then we're able to change the narrative together. Because if you're doing it separate and I'm doing it separate, it's like, all right, well, two separate people. But like if there's some information that you receive and you pass it on to me, I'm like, okay, well now I know I could pass it on to someone else.
Right.
So I feel like that's what we need to be doing in social work, because again, I feel like we worked in silos for so long. You may have some information, you're not passing it on, so it lives and it dies with you. And so, you know, when I'm on my platform and I'm creating things, it's because some of it is lived experience, some of it is stuff that I've learned along the way that I feel like other people should know. And it's interesting because when I do this stuff and I get the feedback, you know, sometimes people are a little nervous or cautious about putting things on the actual page, but they may DM me or they may email me. And I feel like, I don't know, we need more social work mentorship because this newer generation, they're coming into the field. I mean, and I feel like I did too, coming into the field and they're lost. And I'm just kind of like, no, if we can change that and at least give them some foundation, you know, we should use some of our platform to do some of that. Yeah, so networking is very, very important in this field because definitely it's about who you know and not what you know all the time. The degree is good. I'm not going to say it's not.
Yeah.
I learned a lot in the field, you know.
The networking is.
But yeah, the networking.
Yes.
Yeah, to know people in the field, because I feel like the field is big, but it's not really that big.
Yes.
Especially in New York, like you know, housing homelessness, that's a very tight knit circle. Like you see the same people over and over again. You know, foster care, that's kind of like the same people over and over again. So it is good to network and get to know these people and know who's sitting at the table, speaking up, you know, letting people know that you're in the room. That's important. It really is.
Yeah, I absolutely, that is important. Like just knowing people in the field, going to conferences, like networking in conferences or trainings. Like I actually had a social work professor that she literally is like, take a piece of paper. No, I got this piece of paper. It's going around the classroom. You're gonna write your name, write your email, and I'm gonna make copies. That everybody's gonna get a copy of this. This is your network. Networking is extremely important in this field, and I kind of wish that like at least with the school at the school taking more at heed to that, because I ended up finding like running into like ex coworkers in the same program as well. So it's like I was like talking to them, or like my the current coworkers going into grad school like the year after I started. So like I like knew people, but like people I didn't know, to build those relationships. Like now, like I barely talk to anybody I went to grad school with. Like I still talk to people from like high school and like junior high school, but like grad school is like, no, I don't talk to anybody, or I may have one or two people like on Facebook, but that's really it. So definitely building that network from like the ground up. It definitely and it helped like for me starting in social work before I even went to grad school. So I already had like some foundation, and then going to school kind of like, oh, that makes sense now.
Yes. Because I started social work before actually getting my MSW as well. Like my first job out of undergrad was working at Covenant House as a resident advisor. So I mean, I've literally worked from the front line to leadership. I think I've had like every level position, from resident advisor to, you know, a social worker to supervisor to manager. So yeah. I mean, it's social work it's cool. You know, we social work is what you make it at the end of the day. So
yeah, that's definitely true. Like I mean, I'm starting having the ideas of I need to retire soon, but it's cool, but
I don't know. I thought I had another 20, 25 years left of me, but I'm just kind of like, yeah, what's a get rich easy scheme? Because I don't know. I mean, but I still feel like even in my retirement age, I still want to do some social worky stuff. Not sure what that looks like, but I don't know. I'm sure it'll come to me at some point.
Create something else.
Yeah, no, but that's so true, because like once you start with your first idea, then it's just like your creative juices just keep going. Now it's like, all right, I have this other idea, and maybe I should do t-shirts, and maybe I should do this, and it's like, okay, like I didn't know I had all these ideas. This is what I'm saying. Like, you know, like once a business owner,
I gotta relaunch these. Like,
yeah, no, I'm telling you, I'll get one. I'm telling you. Like there's money to be made out here. And I feel like social workers, we shouldn't box ourselves in. Even though we're not taught this in school, I feel like there's so many of us now creating these platforms to let social workers know that your degree goes far. And how you use it is really up to you. Like it doesn't have to be private practice. It doesn't have to be working for a nonprofit. we're in an era where you could just be so creative. So I think that people just need to find what it is that they're comfortable with it and what they love. Find, live in your purpose. But I do love my social work degree. I'm not gonna lie. I feel like it's opened so many doors. I went to Columbia, woohoo, like,
That's how I feel about Fordham.
Yeah, like, it's cool. It's opened some doors, and I've met people in the field that went there too. But the funny thing about even that is, like, graduating from these schools, like, alumni are not even, and I feel like we probably have to do a better job with that too, but like alumni relations are like, I think I went back once after graduation to, like, do like a resume writing thing, but I'm not really connected. And so, like, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if this is a question, but like, if it's part of saving the profession and having these conversations, how can we incorporate some of our schools and universities to the table so that we can have a stronger network? I don't know. I don't really know what that looks like. And so I'm kind of challenging us as social workers to really think about that, because the other thing that is coming up for me is, like, I posed a question once about NASW and like how many people are, a member. And the feedback that I received is like, all right, well, if we have this membership board that's supposed to advocate for us and people are not buying into it because they feel like they're not really doing anything for us, so what do we have? And I don't have an answer for that. I really don't. But I'm kind of wondering, like, do we go back to these alumni associations? Is like there's something that we can be doing as a collective to bring respect back to the profession? I don't know. I'm just kind of putting
it out there. I totally see where you're going with it, because even like, at least from my undergrad, like I'll still get letters or whatever, like they're every once in a blue, like I'll get like something random in the mail, like alumni relations for undergrad. But in terms of like grad school, like I don't really see Fordham like do that like at all. They might ask for money here and there, like whatever. Right. But man, like, yeah, they gotta give me some money back.
Exactly.
Not giving you more money. But like, yeah, I totally feel you on that. Like, and even like NASW, the national branch, had like some like huge missteps in their social media in 2020, so that they're still dealing with some ramifications of that. So it's like why, like, I think I did the student membership like 1 year in grad school, and that was it. Like I didn't get anything out of it. So it was like, what was the point? Like I needed like every dollar, every cent I could get in terms of like, I already had like my son at that point. So like, instead of giving you membership money, like I need diapers and formula.
Yeah, I get it. And that's, I mean, because it's not a cheap membership. I mean, like, no, it's not. It's not a cheap membership. And then on top of the membership, you still have to pay separately if you want to do like CEUs through them, or, whatever talks they have. And so I just kind of was like, all right, well, I'm considering joining, because I think I only did like 1 year way back. But then when I'm hearing the feedback from people, they're like, oh no, like I can just jump on social media and I get more from the social workers online than I do from NASW. And I'm like, dang, okay, wow.
But it's true.
Yeah. So I'm just kind of like, all right, so like, where do we go from here?
But New York City, New York State, their chapters are good.
Yeah, no, I did see they're doing some bold talks or whatever, and I actually participated in one of these chats that they hold around like anti-racism, and I was very impressed. I was like, oh, okay, this is not so bad. So yeah, I have seen their work. But yeah, so I'm just kind of wondering, like, since we have this whole social work movement, and I feel like a lot of us have a platform and we're doing big things in our own separate sort of, sectors or whatever. Maybe there's something that we can do as a collective to give back, or I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I'm just kind of like brainstorming.
No, it does make for good, conversation moving forward, something to think, and hopefully something soon pops up, or maybe we come up with the idea. We sleep, we wake up and like, oh shit, I got the idea. Like, where's my piece of paper?
Yep, that's gonna be
2 o'clock in the morning, like find a piece of paper and a pen.
I'm telling you, that's why I love these conversations, because I feel like with every social worker that I've met, I'm like, wait, there's something else we could do. Oh man. So I love these conversations because they really show how passionate we are about the field, but like also how creative we can be. Like we can do just about anything because I feel like the profession is missing so much. And so I feel like, you know, I love having these conversations because I'm just kind of like, well, maybe it's not me. Maybe we can do it as a group, you know, like maybe somebody else has the idea, but you know, maybe it's our own membership group. I don't know. Hint, 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 I don't know. Hint, hint, hint. I don't know. I'm just, you know, teasing, but maybe.
Yeah, of course. You never know.
You never know. You just never know. I don't know. But, you know, just the idea. I like to throw ideas out there and see what sticks.
How can people find you?
Huh?
How can people find you?
Oh, okay. So I can be found on Instagram on @boardingstaff. And then I also have on Facebook, it's Onboarding Solutions. I can also be found on the website, which is www.onboardingstaff.com. And my email is onboardingstaff@gmail.com. So any one of those, you can find me.
Amazing conversation. Thank you so much for coming on.
Of course.
And we'll be in touch.
All right. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be on your platform. I really enjoyed our conversation. And hopefully this is the first of many conversations.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Take care.
Take care now.
All right. Bye-bye.